Forward to the computer. Okay.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to join us here today. We are CCDG, the Connecticut Collaborative Divorce Group. And as our name suggests, we all feel very strongly about the value of the collaborative process and non-adversarial divorce. So we're going to take the next 20 minutes or so to give you an overview of the collaborative process, what it looks like, what it isn't, and what each of our respective roles as professionals are in that process. At the end, we'll leave open 10 minutes to answer any questions you might have. So feel free to put them in the chat. And if you forget to ask a question or we don't get to your question, you can reach out to any one of us at any time and we'd be happy to answer those questions for you. So let's jump right in. I will start with Yvonne, one of our attorneys. Yvonne, can you give us an overview of the collaborative process, what it is, and how it differs from, say, litigation and mediation?
Sure, Tracy. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I really appreciate everyone being here. And this really is to educate clients and professionals and people who want to do this amazing work and really help people in the state of Connecticut and beyond to divorce with dignity. And that's why we're here. It's really to put the traditional model aside and put together our problem-solving heads. So as far as the models for divorce I'm going to go over three. Those are the main ones. Those are the only ones I really, think of. Litigation is the first one. Everyone knows about this. It's your traditional model. It's the one where, both parties, both clients hire their own lawyer. That lawyer pretty much gives each person their best case scenario. And it can be adversarial. And it can really be where both people are really going forth and not necessarily looking at the family's best interest, but their own client's interest. Not that there's anything wrong with this. It's just more of a traditional model where clients and attorneys may go to court. They may provide testimony, and they really put it in the judge's hands or they put it in a settlement conference hands. And oftentimes, as you can imagine, you've heard some stories where, the economic, and Katie will get into more of the economics of it. I'm here really to talk about the models. And it's really where you're leaving, your thoughts into perhaps a judge's seat, and it's really can be unpredictable. You really don't know if it best serves your family. It really is a matter of a settlement conference where there's negotiations going back and forth in an adversarial way. Some of the pitfalls of litigation, as you've heard of, is that it can really amp up the conflict of the family instead of decrease it. Some of the models we'll be talking about beyond litigation are mediation and collaboration. And this is really in a hopes to manage the conflict in a problem-solving team approach. I'll go into mediation a little bit before I get into collaboration, because we're really here to talk about the collaborative process. Mediation is when a neutral party, a singular or co-mediation, really helps the parties to provide options to solve their divorce, go over maybe some parenting that is collaborative and cooperative. However, the mediation process is limited kind of by a neutral party. That neutral party cannot give legal advice, they can evaluate options, but it really depends on the parties to make decisions on their own. And sometimes the clients feel as if they need some legal advice within the process. So they must go to review counsel, because that neutral party is bound by an ethical responsibility not to provide them with, say, can I do this? Should I waive my right to alimony? Should I accept this settlement? Is this settlement in my best interest? While a mediator can, generate options, engage in really substantive, conversations about what's best for the family and keep it out of the litigation process, they really can't review and give and provide advice to their clients in the mediation process. As far as that is concerned, they really must rely on their review counsel. So this gets me to the collaborative process, which is really why we're here today, and to talk about why this may really benefit the families of Connecticut, and why my amazing colleagues are going to talk about their roles. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the attorney role as well as the whole process. So collaboration is really a team-based approach. We really assemble a team, and it is assembling lawyers, and it's assembling coaches and financial neutrals to really give a holistic and problem-solving approach that benefits the whole family. Some of those examples are, how best do we collaboratively co-parent our kids? How do we put systems in place to be successful in that co-parenting? And what is really amazing about this process is it just doesn't consider your current divorce. It really considers, how is your family going to co-parent? How is your family going to handle the financial issues of divorce now and in the future? And it's really creating an amazing plan for the family to follow. So not only do you have a divorce settlement agreement that you both feel is in the best interest of the children, the team really helps you arrive at that settlement. And how is this done? It's done in a team-based approach where all of the professionals and the clients are in the same meeting. Why does this benefit the client? From what I discussed in mediation, you have your review counsel right in the meeting with you. So some of the challenges of mediation, although it works for many families, is that I hear, well, wait a minute, I need to bring this back to my review counsel. So the review counsel, you go back, you provide either an agreement or some settlements that you may have come to in mediation, and your review counsel is not there with you. So in the collaboration process, you really have your attorney right there to evaluate some of the proposals that are being exchanged. And how this helps people is in real time. As an attorney, it is your ethical duty to rigorously represent your client. However, in the collaborative process, you don't give up that rigorous representation, but what you really do is have a collaborative conversation about what's not only good for you, but what is good for the whole family. And you don't get that.
That's very helpful. I think we need to keep the process moving.
Awesome, Traci. I'll be available for any questions if anyone has any. Thanks a lot.
No problem. That was a really thorough overview. That was great.
Thank you. Wow, 4 minutes goes very fast.
Don't look at the clock.
Especially for attorneys.
So I'll give a brief overview of the role of the coach. I think first and foremost, I want to point out that while I'm in this role as a mental health professional, I am not in this role as a therapist. So I will not be working as your therapist individually or as a couples therapist. I will not be diagnosing. If many people come to the process already with a therapist, but if you need one, I can certainly refer you to one. One of my main roles is to really serve as a facilitator of the process. So my role is to keep the process moving forward, both behind the scenes and in the team meeting, managing things during the process. I will meet with both parties before we get started, right at the very beginning. And so I will have a solid understanding of your dynamics, the issues involved, communication patterns, perhaps triggers that the two of you have. And often when people get to this stage, you have unhealthy communication patterns that can really derail the process. So when we meet, I'll be using my understanding of all of these things to monitor the room and pay attention, monitor emotions, pay attention to how the conversation is going. And I'll use it to help you manage your emotions and manage the whole process. If I notice things are starting to spiral, I will intervene and try to redirect and keep things on track. One of the main things I'm doing is helping us remain focused on your overarching goals and interests, both for the present meeting as well as in the long term. So if a conversation starts to go down, say, a rabbit hole on an issue and a conflict that isn't relevant to addressing and meeting the current goals and interests, I will redirect and bring us back into the process. Another important part of my role is developing a parenting plan. So if you have minor children, I will be working with you to develop a plan that is developmentally appropriate for your children. And ultimately, for myself and really everyone in this process, our goal is to help you get through the process with a relationship intact. It will be a reconfigured relationship, but one that allows you to be civil with each other, to work together on co-parenting issues, and to hopefully, when you're ready, be at the same event together in the same room and not have it turn into a, an incident. So that is my brief overview. Lainey, the other coach, will go into more detail about some specific situations that come up. But before we do that, I'm going to turn it over to Brenda Larkin, who will talk to us about the role of the financial. What is the role of the financial on the collaborative team? And does the financial, Brenda, does the financial attend all of the collaborative team meetings? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Thanks, Traci. So typically divorcing couples are often unaware of financial implications of the settlement options available. So the financial neutral actually helps the couple evaluate their financial situation and then provide creative solutions to the financial problems. The role of the financial neutral, who by the way is either a CFP, a CPA, or a CDFA, which is a certified divorce financial analyst and trained in collaborative divorce, is truly an impartial expert. So they're really there with an unbiased. The financial neutral provides a safe, unbiased environment for spouses to speak openly about their financial fears, concerns, and their goals. So the financial neutral also offers parties a balanced, thorough financial evaluation of the marriage and offers realistic solutions to obstacles to help reach mutual satisfying agreements. So it's really all about getting people on the same page and coming to a fair and equitable conclusion or decision. So some of the areas that we consider, we want the parties to consider, is that now you're supporting two households on income that was previously supported by one. We want to do sustainable budgeting, workable property division, tax issues, business valuations, pension valuations, real estate values. And depending on each couple's situation, the financial professional can perform various functions in a collaborative divorce, such as we can identify and gather necessary financial documentation. So each person would receive a list of required documents that you would need to provide to the financial person. There's financial worksheets to guide you in determining what your expenses are. We use family law software to input the data and ultimately generate reports, which are shared within the process. We identify and clarify and prioritize financial needs, goals, and concerns. We assist in the determination of separate versus marital property, provide long-term projections for future cash flow and net worth. We do some analysis of higher earning spouses' ability to make alimony and maintenance payments. We'll analyze your budget, property, business interests, debt payoff solutions, and we bring a voice to the reality of your financial decisions. In summary, a financial neutral is focused on assisting clients and lawyers in generating feasible financial options and empowering the couple with knowledge so that they can understand the financial impact of the decisions that they make. And the neutral is really savvy when it comes to various financial issues and also problem solvers with the ability to offer realistic options to solutions. And does the financial neutral need to attend all meetings? So really it all depends. Every couple going through the process is truly unique and each situation is different. So the answer to the question really depends on the need for the couple and the couple's comfort level with having a financial professional in each meeting. If the meeting is centered around the finances, then yes, definitely the financial neutral will be there. If the meeting is centered around parenting, chances are the financial does not need to be there, but again, it's really up to the whole team and the couple as to whether or not the financial is going to be there. In the cases I've done, I have been to every single meeting. In some I haven't been to all the meetings. So it's unique and based on what your specific needs are.
Thank you, Brenda. That's terrific. All right, so Lainey, let's turn it over to you. We have a two-part question, sort of related. Can you tell us why is the coach present in all team meetings, including the financial meetings? And then also, how does the mental health coach facilitate healthy relationships between the parents and the children involved?
Thanks, Traci. Those are two really important questions, because the question about why would a mental health coach be present at a financial meeting is one of the things we hear most often. And yet the interesting thing is, if you think about a divorce, the finances are one of the most emotional parts of the divorce. Obviously, taking care of the children is the other big piece, but the finances, people are sitting there suddenly going from a two-income household, or at least one household where there was only one household for expenses to be shared among, to be shared, to suddenly now we have to figure this out. How are we going to live? And so the questions are, what's going to happen to the house? Do I want to keep the house? I see lots of women who say, yes, I absolutely want to keep the house. And then the reality sets in that, oh my gosh, now I'm going to be responsible for all these things, and a snowplow and all of that kind of stuff. So there's an awful lot of emotion connected to that. The other piece, along with the future survival, not just the house, is, some people have never worked for 20 years. They've given up their career to support the other spouse. And so the idea of suddenly being on their own is terrifying. And how the finances are going to be shared and split is really overwhelming. The other piece that goes along with that, or for example, the coach, being the mental health coach, is often aware of many of the emotional needs that were there even before the divorce was happening. So for the parents and the children. So what kinds of monies need to be put aside to make sure that the needs can be met, to meet the financial needs of this family. So for example, if I've worked with a family where somebody has multiple sclerosis, we have a lot of physical needs that may need to be taken care of, as well as the emotional needs that are going to go along with the chronic illness. So we really need to make sure that those become part of the discussion. And if we need to bring in any other experts to find out what would this cost, what kinds of things are going to be connected to it, cost of medications. So the coach really has a big part in that. And needless to say, I've been in lots of meetings where somebody got very, very upset during this. And it's really up to the coach to sometimes say, okay, I think maybe we need to take a break. And, we go outside for a little while, or we sit down, go for a walk, sit outside. I've been known to sit in a corridor with somebody sitting and crying for a little while just to, regain composure. One thing I would add very quickly is that during Zoom, we've been able to use breakout rooms, so that even in this time where the courts have been shut down or not functioning well, we have been able to take breaks and get people out, to get them away from a person if they're really upset about it. The other thing that's very interesting is on Zoom, we can have people put sticky notes up, and if they don't want to look at the other person during the meeting, which is often helpful and kind of humorous, but it helps. The other question, Traci, is in terms of how can we facilitate a good parent-child relationship. I very often have parents come in, they all start out with, I will settle with nothing less than 50-50. Well, I don't even know what 50-50 is, because if you're living in the same house with your children, you don't see them 50-50 because somebody's working in or out of the house. So what we do is we really go back to something that you've all mentioned here, is interest. Because the one thing parents almost always agree on is we hope our kids are going to be okay. If they're choosing collaborative, one of the biggest things that they say is we want our kids to be okay. So I can keep bringing them back. The coach can keep bringing them back to, how is this agreement going to be okay for your children? If one of you is living in a hovel and the other has this gorgeous house, is that going to help the children, or are they going to get mad? So we can keep bringing them back to that position. That way we can develop parenting plans that are developmentally appropriate. So the plan that might be appropriate for a 2-year-old may not be appropriate for the 15-year-old. Sometimes we even have to have different plans for the different kids. So we can look at those issues. And one of the cool things about collaborative is we let people know that after this process is over, although they can't come to the coach as an individual therapist, we have very clear boundaries as to what you can and can't do in this process. But they can come back as a couple, as parents, and say, we've run into a roadblock and we're not sure what to do. And the coach can sit down with that family and say, let's see if we can figure it out, and not before anybody tries to file motions. I had this happen recently with a family that it was a year post judgment, and there were some minor things that were going on, and they both had motions all ready to go. It was going to cost them thousands. And about $300 later, we had it completely resolved. Materials that they needed to exchange were exchanged, and the family moved on much, in a much better situation without ever having to go to court. So obviously, I think you can feel my passion for this process, because I think it is so much better for the family, and allows the family to really divorce with dignity and in the best interest of the kids.
Thank you, Elaine. Terrific. Appreciated those anecdotal stories. Katie, last but very not least at all. So often people will hear about this process and think, wow, this sounds great, but it can be a little overwhelming when you hear about all of the professionals involved and what might this cost. And can you explain a little bit about how this works in terms of finances? How are the parties paid? Is it one payment? Are people paid separately? And what do we do to try to keep the process affordable for people?
So I think when people initially hear about the collaborative process, because it's very upfront about who's involved in this process from the beginning, people initially think, wow, that's going to be really expensive. We're going to hire our 2 collaboratively trained attorneys. We're going to hire a financial neutral, and we're going to hire a mental health professional all right off the bat. But what they don't think about is that when you go to litigation, a lot of times you end up hiring all of those people anyways. You're definitely going to hire your 2, if you choose to be represented, you're going to hire your 2 attorneys one way or the other. So that's a similar cost to litigation and collaborative. But people forget that they don't know that the court has the authority in litigation to order people to go to therapy, order the children into therapy, order the parents into therapy. So right off the bat, by having a mental health professional in the collaborative process from the very beginning, that's a known now. That's a known cost. You know what's involved in that part of the process. Same thing with the financial neutral. In collaborative, you're hiring one financial neutral who's going to do all of the work for both parties. So instead of having both of your attorneys gathering the documents, inputting the information into the software, you have one person that you're paying to do that instead of 2. And then if you compare that to litigation, in litigation, you're potentially hiring multiple financial professionals. You're hiring potentially appraisers on both sides, dueling appraisers, because if you can't agree to use one, you're each going to want your own. You're going to potentially hiring dueling business evaluators to the cost of $10,000 to $15,000 a piece. So while collaborative looks like upfront, it's a lot of money. In the long run, if you're looking at traditional litigation versus collaborative, it could be much less expensive. Now, of course, if it's not, if it's a little bit more of a difficult case, it's more in depth. Yes, you're going to have more than a couple of sessions in the collaborative process. It is going to cost you money, but litigation costs you money too. So knowing that you control the collaborative process, you control who's hired, you control who's doing the work on your case. You have a little bit more control over that cost, as opposed to in litigation, your attorney saying, well, we have got to hire A, B, and C, and it's going to cost you this amount of money, and you lose your control. So I think in the long run, in terms of your mental health and your finances, collaborative is the better process to be involved in, just in terms of, what to expect from the very first meeting with your collaboratively trained attorney. You're going to know exactly what to expect.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there anything else our panelists want to add before we open it up for questions?
I just want to jump in and say something about what Katie was bringing up about the cost, because one of the other pieces about cost is you mentioned it's really up to the clients in the end how much this costs. And I actually, during COVID, had 2 cases that settled in 3, I think they were 2 to 3 meetings. And it was because they did all their homework, they knew what they wanted, and they weren't fighting with each other. So that really, if you and your spouse can do the homework and come to agreements, you can really keep the cost down, and which can be very different than sometimes in court, where things, if you're litigating and things are just getting dragged out. So the more you work together, and that's the role of the team, the psychologist, the mental health coach, the financial, are really helping you keep those things together and help you make decisions, hopefully a little bit more quickly.
Very true. Thank you. So do any of our attendees have any questions for us? No. I think we had some other questions. Did you write down some questions that you had been asked, Lainey?
Yeah, I think one of the questions we get asked a lot was, if I like the coach, can I use that coach as my individual therapist? And the answer is absolutely not. The coach is a neutral. They must remain neutral. As I said, they can be used as a follow-up after the divorce, because one of the cool things about your parenting plan is there are no parenting plan police. So if you and your spouse agree on things, you can change that parenting plan. You know, some of the best parenting plans are ones that don't really get looked at that much because the parents agree on it. But when you don't agree, you can come back to that coach and sit down. And since you've already developed a relationship with them, it's often much easier to come to some decisions as a team, together. And you can actually bring that question back to the entire team if you needed to gather the team again.
So same with a financial neutral. A financial neutral cannot work with either party post-divorce. So we can give you suggestions of who to use, but we cannot work with you. I mean, we're truly a neutral in the divorce process.
Thank you.
Tracy,
Yvonne?
one more. Yeah,
Yeah.
so sorry. Katie brought up a really good topic that I'd like to just touch on a little bit, is timing. So really, and Lainey, you brought it up too about the court. You're really, timing wise, you're in control of this process. That, if you want to be, like you said, Lainey, productive in your discussions, you can really come to a wonderful agreement, and an agreement that meets your family's needs much sooner than a court would render a judgment. So that's also one benefit of collaboration that Katie touched on a little bit with all the court confines.
Really
Yeah.
driving the bus, and you have a lot more control.
Yeah,
over
you're
the
driving the
process.
bus. The court isn't driving the bus.
And you don't have a judge making decisions for your children and your family.
That's right.
I mean, and that's a huge piece.
Yeah.
When you say, parents say, well, we can't decide, fine, let the judge make the decision. Well, these are your children. The judge may not even know your children's names. Do you really want somebody who doesn't know you or your kids making lifelong decisions for your
Right.
children? So I just want to point out to everybody that's on here that we are recording this. So it will be available. I'm not sure where it will be originally posted, but probably on the CCND website as well as our own, and possibly on our own Facebook pages. So people will be able to access this recording, which will be important, I think.
Right. Okay.
I see we have
Any
somebody
other-
else that joined.
We had one person join as we're getting ready to wrap up. Thank you for joining us, Christina. And I think that's a wrap, unless there's anything else.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Tracy, for being a wonderful moderator, facilitator.
Why doesn't the team stay on for just a minute if we can do
Sure.
that?
You can turn off the recording.